Hello, good evening and welcome. This is Biz First in Focus. I'm Nadim Majid, and today we're going to be talking about One Belt, One Road. Is it China's grand plan for world domination, or is it, as its supporters claim, an opportunity for the rest of Asia and the rest of the world to benefit from China's prosperity? To talk about this and more, we're joined by Mr. Rohan Masakorala. He's the CEO of the Shippers Academy here in Colombo. Mr. Masakorala is a regular guest on Biz First in Focus, and of course Biz First Review 360 as well. Mr. Masakorala, thank you very much for joining us. First and foremost, the question that I pose to our viewers this evening: is it China's grand plan for world domination, or is it an opportunity for the rest of the world, Sri Lanka specifically, to benefit from China's prosperity?
The answer is yes for both. Of course, China is a rising power and it wants to dominate world politics, and it's going towards that direction clearly. But on the other hand, if you look at the One Belt, One Road initiative, it also talks of economics, a lot of economics, because China over the last 3 decades or more has been having a double-digit economic growth. But now it has come to a soft landing, growing at 7%. So now it needs to look at other ways of improving its trade, its exports, and its supplies, resources coming into China, which will create great opportunity to Asia, Africa, and Central Asia and Europe as well.
What does this mean for Sri Lanka, the One Belt, One Road program? We've seen, we've had a lot of talk about it. We've talked about the Hambantota port and the Hambantota development project, China's influence, China's investments rather in the Colombo port, specifically the deepwater terminal. Then we see Chinese investment, of course, in the Matala Rajapaksa International Airport, and at the same time we're seeing and this government is trying to push for several joint ventures with India and Japan, specifically in the area surrounding Trincomalee. How does the One Belt, One Road plan that China has affect this for Sri Lanka?
Well, as you know, Sri Lanka is located in that critically important geographical location in the middle of Indian Ocean, which connects to the Middle East and the Far East and also Indian subcontinent very easily for shipping companies, where we are adjacent to the shipping route. So obviously China has seen it. I see China, as I said, had reserves to do all this, and they have the cash. They are probably the only country today that has the excess cash to do this project, and they have already committed $1 trillion onto this One Belt, One Road. And also, if you look at the road side of it, a lot of things are happening in Central Asia as well.
Yes, you mentioned $1 trillion. Already $57 billion US committed to the China-Pakistan economic corridor.
That's right.
So I'll make my question more specific, actually. If we're seeing a lot of opposition to these, China being, people are saying, given the Hambantota port and 15,000 acres of land for an industrial zone, etc. If Sri Lanka were to pull out, would China be able to still go ahead with this project, with this grand project, without Sri Lanka's participation?
Of course, yes, China will have their options, and probably China won't lose out in a big way, because today's modern technology allows various other mechanisms to work. And of course, they have also worked out with some other countries like Malaysia, which is a hub in Southeast Asia. Pakistan, they have already bought a port in Pakistan. They have, on the Pakistan economic corridor. They have bought ports in Piraeus. They have bought into ports in Africa. So they are very well. If you look at the number of ports, it's an enormous number of ports that China has control for their One Belt, One Road. And I don't think Sri Lanka can afford to lose out this opportunity, because if you have to be a shipping hub, China has to be part and parcel of their shipping hub, just as India has to be part and parcel of our shipping hub.
But it's a very delicate balance, isn't it? I mean, on the one side you've got Sri Lanka's big brother neighbor, India, and also, as of recently, an ally in the United States. The US, funnily enough, is participated in this One Belt, One Road program, the summit in Beijing. How, for Sri Lanka, a small country, how do you sort of balance between these giants, the US eagle, the Chinese dragon?
Well, as far as Sri Lanka is concerned, if our ambitions are to become a maritime hub, we need all players. There is no selection here. India is as important for us as China is. Both countries are important. We know that there is political difficulties between India and China, so maybe Sri Lanka will be the best place for them to meet together and do business better. There are security concerns, of course, all over India, because India is surrounded by the One Belt One Road initiative. If you look at the China-Pakistan economic corridor, which India says that it goes through their territorial areas disputed. On the other hand, Nepal has just agreed to work with China on the One Belt One Road. Bangladesh has started working. China has started working. Myanmar has started working. So if you look at the Bay of Bengal region also, all the countries are involved with the One Belt One Road.
And you even have India has a border dispute with China itself in Arunachal Pradesh, which China claims as South Tibet.
Exactly. So the issue is these have to be treated as separate issues. If you are a mature economy and mature politicians, I think politicians do understand this. They need to work together rather than go into confrontation in an area where we can bring in prosperity to India also. Because if this network of rail, road and energy transportation can be linked into India also, India is a massive economy that can manufacture a lot of products and services. They also will have access to Central Asia, Africa through these improved infrastructure models. So it should not be all negative at all for me. Politically, these leaders have to manage it.
When you say politically these leaders have to manage it, there are you get the question of ideology also that comes into it, where if you take both issues as separately, eventually they're going to come to a head. So the question that I posed at the beginning, is it a plan for world domination, or is it an opportunity for other countries to benefit from China's prosperity? Those security concerns and China's actions, China's behavior come into question. If you look at the South China Sea, as I mentioned, those border disputes all around India, China's problems with Japan over these controversial islands, China's building of of these man-made islands in the South China Sea and other areas. Those are very real concerns for people. And the fear, of course, is that this project, this mega project, gives China greater access or greater ability to do similar things all around the world, not just in the Orient or the Far East, but also in the East, the Middle East, Africa, and maybe even get onto America's doorstep.
Well, if you study the One Belt One Road initiative, Americas are there in it at some point. It is there. So it's not a surprising thing. China has a major vision. It's a long-term vision. I'm talking 5-6 decades of vision on this project. Yes, I wouldn't deny that China wants to dominate world politics as the second largest economic power in the world. Similarly, the United States, if you look at most of their naval operations are in all parts of the world, including Asia. So nobody talks about it too much, but their presence is very much there. And look at the South China situation. Yes, there is disagreement between some of the countries, but look at the business side of it. Whether it is Korea or Japan or Philippines, all of them are working on the other hand with China for economic matters. So yes, these concerns will be there, and we will have to see how China behaves. Of course, India is also emerging superpower. So of course, India will have a say in this part of the world.
Mr. Masakura, we have to go in for a short commercial break. When we come back, though, we will continue this line of discussion. The One Belt, One Road. Will China remain the world's second largest economy for much longer if this project gets off the ground? Welcome back to the program. We were talking about China and the world, the One Belt, One Road program. Our guest this evening is Mr. Rohan Masakorala, the CEO of the Shippers Academy, Colombo. Mr. Masakorala, when we left off, we were talking about the concerns that the rest of the world has, especially given China's sometimes aggressive behavior when it comes to situations like international situations like border disputes. My question is this: the One Belt One Road program is a ambitious project, but we know very little in terms of specifics. Will this One Belt One Road project really put China in control of most of the world's shipping and logistics?
Well, if you look at Asia, Eurasia, on the land side, yes, the One Belt One Road will have significant impact for China's trade and control over its movement of cargo from various continents. Also, if you look at the sea route, of course the sea routes have been existing, just that the Chinese government has put more money into controlling of the ports where the sea business actually happens. So yes, definitely they will have more control. If you look at the number of ports that are involved in the One Belt One Road project, both from the ocean side and the land side, yes, of course they will have more control of trade routes.
Ms. Maskol, I'm a student of history, and when looking at, just giving a cursory glance to this maritime Silk Route, the One Belt One Road program that China has in mind, it reminds me of another power in the past, the Portuguese, who set up what people call a trading post empire. They weren't really interested in colonizing countries, they just wanted to control global trade. Is this what China is trying to do?
Well, I wouldn't say no, because they want trade to happen, because they have 1.5 billion people in the coming next 2 decades, and they need to run the country efficiently and effectively, so they need business to happen in favor of them trading. So obviously, yes, from, if you go to the Ming dynasty, the Silk Road, all that is also a trading post, as you said, like the Dutch did some time back in this part of the world. So yes, I wouldn't deny that China is expanding its trade nodes to control trade for their own benefit as well. And also supply chain security, energy security, these things are important for a large economy and large number of people. So obviously the other countries also have the same strategy. If you look at United States today, which is the powerhouse of the world, it also has all its nodes around this part of the world, in Africa, Middle East, to secure its own interest. We can't stop those things happening, but we should be able to be smart enough to get what we can get benefit out of these mega projects where the big countries are involved in. And that is why I suppose the United States is now participating in China in these discussions, when this came in 2013, they laughed at it.
That's a funny thing also, because you see with the US President Donald Trump, before he was elected president, he had no problems with labeling China as a currency manipulator. After, he says now is not the time.
Yes.
This thawing in relations between the Trump administration and China, and if you look at India's position, where does Sri Lanka really fit into this, on this global trade, especially when taking into consideration tradenomics?
Well, I would say Sri Lanka is such a small economy, but such an important geographic location for global players in terms of trade, security, and things like that. Just like Singapore is such a small place, but it has become a very important, significant location for trade as well as security in that part of the world. So I think Sri Lanka's role will continue to be that, and we need to engage both India, China, United States, our regional friends, because we as a country, what do we want? We want it to become a maritime and a logistics hub, and that can probably alleviate a lot of poverty out of this country if the proper projects come in. Because the multiplier of effect of transportation is huge, and when we have a hub like that, it might automatically become a financial center which the government wants to happen. So major players like China, India have to be opened up for them to come in and do business here.
The summit in China, what will Sri Lanka's position be there? Are we a backbencher at this summit?
I think probably we are a backbencher because we are dependent of the One Belt One Road initiative as far as investments are concerned. So we would want Chinese to put more money to our ports and more investments into free zones, manufacturing zones, and to see whether they could use the Mattal airport for economic benefit for the country. So we would be probably backbenchers, but on the sidelines, probably our government will talk about the more pertinent problems what we are facing with the debt situation with the non-performing ports in the south. Of course, then Colombo Port South terminal of China is doing very well. So obviously that the deep draft port and they will have business. So yes, you're right. We will not be a major player in decision making in that part of the world on one road, one belt initiative.
But then, how does it really give us negotiating power? I mean, the Prime Minister has spoken of alleviating security concerns. He has said that there will be no military application for any of these ports, not even in the smallest way. Basically, that submarines are not going to be allowed, nuclear submarines are not going to be allowed to come and dock at Sri Lankan ports. But when the country is not really a decision maker at these international summits, when you're just a backbencher and decisions are being made about your country, doesn't that give sort of validity to what those in the opposition are saying?
No, when I say that we don't have in a summit like this a major role to play, but of course the security aspects will be separately bilaterally discussed between us and China. That I'm not saying that is not going to happen, that we are going to wash out and say okay, you just come here and do anything. I don't think that's not the issue I'm trying to talk about. What I'm trying to say is the China's grand project, right? It's countries like Germany, United Kingdom are involved in this. Right? Already freight trains are moving, so those countries also have to have similar security concerns if China is expanding to the European soils with the railway and the roads, which they will have some kind of a say when their trains go and their cargo is moving across trade borders. So we don't have to be scared of those things, but of course we have to put our house in order in terms of protecting our national interest, territorial integrity and the law of the sea. Those things have to be protected by bilateral arrangements with whoever who manages or come and operate terminals in this country.
On that note, I'd like to go in for a short commercial break, Mr. Masa Korala. When we come back, we're going to be talking about where Sri Lanka fits in on the One Belt, One Road project, and specifically, what are the benefits for our country. We'll see you in just a minute. Welcome back to the program. Mr. Masa Korala, I'd like to dive straight into this question. What is it that Sri Lanka can do to soften India's sort of concerns when it comes to China? We were talking about how in the South China Sea the Chinese are building artificial islands. So the Indians are of course very concerned, given that right now the Chinese are building an artificial island just off the Sri Lankan shoreline. So I suppose for the Indians it's a very real worry that they won't go around building artificial islands all around Sri Lanka's exclusive economic zone and in the exclusive economic zones of other countries that are that are part of this One Belt, One Road, One Belt project.
So if you look at, you're talking of the Colombo International Financial Center, or formerly the Port City project. Of course, yes, earlier I was also concerned when there was about 20 hectares being given on outright basis to China. I also had this concern. I think we are not agreeable that kind of a model. But China coming and building a financial city, or any other country coming and building something for investment purposes, I don't see we should be too worried about it. India was worried when we were going to give it on kind of a outright model. So as I said, India is not only worried about Sri Lanka, they are surrounded by Chinese investments, including the disputed Kashmir region. So we, as far as Sri Lanka is concerned, we need to talk to India and keep them informed of our decisions, ask them to come and be part and parcel of Sri Lanka's development. In fact, I blame India, being such a close neighbor. They never took advantage of Sri Lanka to come and get their companies to come and invest, because they would have been the biggest beneficiary, because 75% of transshipment or regional volume is Indian.
Now that the US has also decided to engage with China on this One Belt, One Road project, Do you think that there's an opportunity for Sri Lanka to act as sort of a mediator of sorts in this trilateral geopolitical balancing game between the US, China?
To mediate, there is no open dispute, right? So there is no story of a mediation there. Of course, there's a trust issue happening, and of course, there's a cold kind of a disagreement between these two major powers in South Asia as well as United States having interest in East Asia itself. So Sri Lanka's role is at the moment, yes, we can take away these misunderstandings, whether Sri Lanka is either going towards China or India or that kind of a wrong signal. I think Sri Lanka, as I said at the beginning, we need everybody if we are to become a hub. If you look at other hubs like Singapore or Dubai, they have all the international partners within their system and they balance it quite well. So it's a matter of balancing. Our problem is, I can see, is that we are very close geographically to India, which we can't do much about that. So the implications, whatever the investments happen to the Chinese, are looked at not so comfortably because of the disputes they have with the Chinese authorities by the Indian government. So I propose that, I think, in my opinion, India should engage China. They are the two major powers in South Asia, and nobody wants a conflict between India and China. It's not going to be beneficial to any one of us in Asia. So I think they should understand each other better, and then Sri Lanka can always be a platform for them to understand each other very well. But I think I again go back to India. India needs to play a proactive role in this part of the world. It's their region. So they need to engage and make friends with all the neighbors around who are working with China, who are on the neighbors on the other side. If you look at Myanmar, Thailand, Nepal, they are bordering China also.
The BIMSTEC countries.
BIMSTEC countries. So India, I'm sure India understands that. So those countries are in between the two major powers in Asia. They can't just be listening to India or China. They also have to do a balancing act. We are on the maritime road, an important position. So that position has to be used to the advantage of Sri Lanka.
Using it to the advantage of Sri Lanka, this is what I want to get into before we wrap up the program. We mentioned the CICT terminal in Colombo. As you mentioned, that terminal is doing really well. Its turnover is massive by comparison to the rest of the Colombo. So there is a massive benefit that China is getting out of it, or at least the Chinese corporation in charge of that terminal is getting out of it. What is the benefit for Sri Lanka, and will it be a similar sort of situation when it comes to hopping on to this One Belt One Road project, because there aren't any specifics? Are we going to end up with a similar situation where we've given away what could have been a valuable resource, and we're just another trading post for China?
You're absolutely right in that. When the CICT was given, of course there was supposed to be 3 parties, and then suddenly it became 2 parties, and the majority stakeholder 85% went to CICT. So obviously the business today generated out of CIT, majority goes to China. Now this government, when the president came into power, he talked about the Temasek model of Singapore to be implemented for state-owned projects. That is a reasonable percentage of investment by the government of Sri Lanka for cash cows. So obviously CICT was a cash cow. As I said, in my landlord model, SLPA, Sri Lanka Ports Authority, had a company called JCB Limited. They should have had at least 30% of the CICT. So it was a wrong decision as far as I am concerned. But of course the CICT terminal is a deep draft port, and it will attract ships, and it will attract more ships to Sri Lanka. So when a ship comes, I always look at it as a foreign direct investment. The multiplier effect of a ship coming into the country is huge. So we have more ships, more cargo happening. In a smaller scale, even our economy will be expanding in some way.
We have similar problems now with the negotiations over the Hambantota port, where initially they were talking about 80%, then 60%. Why is it that the Sri Lankan government doesn't really have a proper leg to stand on when negotiating with China?
Well, Hambantota was a bit of a different model. If you compare Colombo, Colombo was a generating business. Hambantota didn't have any business. There was no business plan as far as I can see now. No shipping line was coming behind the government and say we want terminals here. No, they were all wanting the East Terminal and other terminals in Colombo. So the Hambantota model, again, I have been telling at various forums, I don't agree of the model. Of course, there is a rationale for a port. Ports start gradually and expanding depending on the volume expansion. But we went and put a lot of money. For example, the breakwater of Colombo port and the terminal of the Chinese totally cost about $800 to $850 million. Without even having any of those, just to dig the port and get the port alone in Hambantota, we have spent $1.5 billion with no business plan. If it was a hotbed of business, people would have already come and started working there even during the last regime. So there is a vacuum there, and the model is a bit different there. So obviously the Chinese have put the money. They are willing to take a loss for another 20, 30 years because it is an important node for their long-term plan of One Road, One Belt initiative.
Thank you very much, Mr. Masakorala, for speaking to us. You've clarified and you've shed some light onto this debate. I think very important factors for policymakers to take into consideration, especially when negotiating Sri Lanka's position on the One Belt, One Road project. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
And also to our viewers, I hope that this discussion has clarified doubts that you might have had over this One Belt, One Road project. Is it China's grand plan for world domination? Is it an opportunity for countries like Sri Lanka to benefit from Chinese prosperity? Yes, and yes to both, according to Mr. Rohan Masakorala, the chairman of the CEO of the Shippers Academy of Colombo. We'll see you again next week on BizFirst in Focus.